There was a horse that stood in a graveyard, rain or shine, same spot, every day. People thought he was lost until they found out whose grave it was. It wasn't just anyone. It was the girl who raised him. And the day she died, he vanished. Months later, he came back, and what he did at her grave made a whole town cry. Millersfield was the kind of small Kentucky town that people drove through on the way to somewhere else. Life there moved quiet and slow, like mist through the hills, and the cemetery on the edge of town was even slower. Time stopped there. That's why it was so strange when the horse showed up. No saddle, no rope, just a white stallion, tall and still, standing at the far corner of the cemetery near the rusted fence line. It was early morning when a jogger first saw him, fog curling through the trees, dew silvering the grass. The horse didn't move, didn't graze, just stood with his head slightly bowed, facing one crooked wooden cross that barely stuck out above the weeds. Locals figured he was just a stray, maybe escaped from a nearby farm. But the next day, he was still there. And the day after that, and the day after that. Some people brought apples, others called the animal shelter. A few teenagers tried to get close for selfies, but the horse backed off every time someone approached. Still, he never ran. And he never left. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink from the stream that cut through the back of the property. He just stood, like he was guarding something, or mourning it. Sheriff Gary McKee, a man not easily moved by animals, leaned against his cruiser one afternoon and watched him through the fence. "I've seen horses bolt from gunshots," he muttered, "but I've never seen one this still." When asked what to do, the shelter offered to tranquilize and relocate him, but the sheriff just shook his head. "Not yet. Something ain't right. That horse, he's got a reason." And deep down, they all felt it, even if no one said it out loud. The stallion didn't look lost. He looked like he'd already found what he came for, and had no intention of leaving it behind. The grave the horse stood beside had no name. Just a leaning wooden cross, gray with rot and weather, barely visible through the weeds. No flowers, no stone. No one from town could remember who'd been buried there. Not the church secretary, not the undertaker, not even the pastor. It had simply faded into silence. But the horse hadn't forgotten. And neither had Martha Lang. Martha was 67 years old, a retired librarian with a bad hip and a better memory than most men half her age. She'd seen the reports on Facebook, heard the rumors from the ladies at the diner, and finally, curiosity got the best of her. Wrapped in a wool shawl and carrying an old photo album under her arm, Martha walked the gravel path between the headstones, past the rusted gate and crooked trees, until she saw him, the white stallion. He was still there, in the exact same spot. This time he turned his head when she approached, but he didn't move. He just watched her quietly, his dark eyes wet but calm. Martha didn't flinch. She didn't try to touch him. Instead, she knelt by the grave and laid the photo album gently in the grass. "I know who this is," she said softly. A few folks nearby looked up. "It's Clara James," Martha continued. "Lived down in the hollow near the Ridge Road. Sweet girl. Heart condition. Didn't make it past 22. Someone asked if she was sure. Martha opened the album. There, tucked in yellowed plastic sleeves, was a photo. A young woman with straw-colored hair smiling wide from the back of a pale stallion. Her arms wrapped tight around his neck, her face pressed to his mane. It wasn't just any horse. It was him. Ghost. "That horse saved her life more than once," Martha said, her voice cracking. "When she collapsed out by the fence, he'd neigh until someone came, stood over her like a soldier on watch. The crowd went quiet. She died 2 winters back. Her folks had no money for a headstone. No family left to visit. Martha's hands trembled as she flipped the page. But I guess someone remembered her after all. The horse had disappeared after her funeral. No one had seen him for nearly a year. And now, here he was. Not lost, not abandoned. He had come back to stand watch. Not because anyone told him to, but because loyalty, real loyalty, doesn't end when a heart stops beating. That night, the sky broke. The wind tore through Millersfield like a freight train, knocking over trash bins and slamming shutters against windows. Lightning cracked open the dark like a camera flash, and thunder rolled so deep it shook the ground under your feet. Still, the horse didn't move. Ghost stood at Clara James's grave like a statue carved from snow and sorrow. His white coat turned slick with rain. His mane hung in heavy strands. But he didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just stood there, soaked and silent, as if the storm didn't scare him, as if he'd stood through worse. Sheriff McKee drove by around 1:30 a.m. His cruiser lights caught the horse in silhouette, upright, proud, alone in the cemetery while the world roared around him. The sheriff stayed in the car for a minute, watching through the glass. "Damn," he muttered. "He's really not leaving." By morning, the whole town knew. Animal control came again, this time with a vet and a trailer. They brought hay, warm blankets, sweet feed. They tried coaxing him, tried talking, tried whistling softly like Clara used to do. Ghost didn't even look at them. But someone else was watching. Emmett Briggs, a quiet 17-year-old who worked part-time at the feed store, had been following the story for days. He wasn't a talker, kept to himself. But he'd grown up around horses. He understood them better than most people. He showed up that morning with no tools, no food, no rope, just a folding chair and a heavy hoodie. He climbed the fence, ignoring the shouted warnings from officials, and walked toward Ghost with slow, measured steps. The rain had stopped, but the grass was wet and the air hung heavy with that post-storm stillness, like everything was holding its breath. Ghost watched him come. He didn't move. Emmett stopped a few feet away, unfolded the chair, and sat down, knees bent, elbows resting on thighs, eyes locked with the horse. He didn't speak, didn't reach. He just sat. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 40. The sun started to rise, and then Ghost took a step forward, slow, careful. His ears twitched, his muscles trembled. He walked those last few feet, paused, and then lowered his heavy head into Emmett's lap. The boy didn't move. He just let it happen. His hands gently rested on the horse's muzzle as Ghost exhaled, a long breath full of something deeper than fatigue. Something that sounded like surrender. It wasn't just a bond. It was the moment the horse allowed someone to carry a piece of his grief, and no one who saw it forgot. For the first time in weeks, the graveyard was empty. Ghost had followed Emmett home that day, not like a pet, not like an animal obeying a command. He simply chose him. The town couldn't believe it. The same stallion that had stood unmoving in storms now wandered freely behind a quiet teenager in muddy boots. The boy didn't talk about it, and people didn't push. They just watched in silent awe as Ghost trotted behind him down Main Street, calm as a shadow. Emmett cleared out the old family barn, filled it with fresh hay, hung up a lantern so Ghost wouldn't be in the dark. He even slept out there the first 2 nights, curled up in a sleeping bag beside the stallion, his hand resting lightly on Ghost's flank. And the horse, he rested. He ate, he drank, he lay down for the first time in months. But something in his eyes had changed. Not pain, not fear, just peace. 6 days passed, On the 7th morning, Emmett woke early, expecting to hear the soft rhythm of hooves on straw. Instead, he found Ghost lying in the hay, still and quiet, his head turned slightly to the open door, where the dawn light streamed in across the floor. Between his teeth, loosely held, was a piece of worn fabric, a torn blue scarf. It was Clara's. No one knew when he'd taken it. Maybe he'd carried it the whole time. Maybe he'd gone back for it. The vet said his heart had simply stopped. No signs of injury, no signs of stress, just rest, like a soul that had finally been granted permission to leave. They buried him next to Clara, on the edge of the cemetery with full town blessing. This time, there was a proper marker. White stone, black letters. Clara James, 1999, 2021. And beside her, the one who never left. Ghost. On the morning of the funeral, Emmett stood alone at the grave, one hand on the fresh earth, the other holding that blue scarf. He didn't cry, not in front of anyone, but when he walked away, his shoulders were shaking. Now, every year on the same day, people leave apples at the graves. Some come out of respect. Some come out of curiosity. Most leave in tears. But it's not from grief. It's from witnessing something so pure, so quiet, and so faithful. It breaks you in the best way. Because sometimes love doesn't need words. It just needs to stay.